Devonte Cross was 38 years old, and until that Saturday morning, he believed his marriage was worth saving. He was a logistics consultant who drove a regular truck, wore regular clothes, and never once mentioned to anyone that he had spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL. 2 combat deployments, a hand-to-hand combat instructor certification, and the kind of training most people only see in movies. He had come home quieter than he left, and he had been trying ever since to close the distance. Then he drove past his wife's martial arts studio on a morning she thought he was home. He watched her walk into another man's arms like she had been doing it for years, because she had. What Devonte found over the 5 days that followed, the hotel receipts, the deleted texts dating back 22 months, the secret account she had been quietly draining, didn't break him. It clarified him. And when her lover looked him up and down in that dojo, smiled at his students, and grabbed him by the shirt, he had no idea what he had just started. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was black, and it was hot, and Devonte Cross had been sitting at the kitchen table since 5:47 a.m. That was normal. That was every morning. The security logistics report was open in front of him, a 12-page document from the regional shipping firm that paid him to think about threats before other people thought about breakfast. He read it the same way he read everything, slowly, completely, not missing anything. The television in the living room was on low. Weather, then traffic, then weather again. Outside the kitchen window, the neighborhood was still gray and quiet, the oak trees heavy with the kind of stillness that comes just before the world decides to wake up. Devonte lifted his coffee and took a sip. On the hallway wall, visible from where he sat, was the photo. 8 men in full gear, squinting against a sun that didn't belong to any country most people would recognize. Devonte was third from the left, younger, harder around the edges in a way that wasn't visible anymore, or at least not immediately. Tricia had mentioned once, early in the marriage, that the photo made her uncomfortable. Too intense, she'd said. He'd nodded and left it exactly where it was. He turned a page in the report. He heard her before he saw her. The deliberate sounds of a woman moving through a kitchen she didn't want to engage with this morning. The soft pull of a cabinet. The refrigerator opening and closing without anything being taken out. The particular silence of someone managing their own presence. Tricia came around the corner dressed for the dojo. Black leggings, a fitted athletic top, her hair pulled back. She looked good. She always looked good. And that was not the thing that caught his attention. The thing that caught his attention was the perfume. It was the one she kept on the right side of the vanity. The good one. The one in the glass bottle she'd bought at a department store counter on their anniversary trip to Charleston 2 years ago. He knew its smell the way you know the smell of your own house, without thinking, without deciding to. She was wearing it to a Saturday morning workout class. He said nothing. "Morning," she said. She poured herself a glass of water at the sink, her back to him. "Morning," he said. Her phone was on the counter beside her. The screen lit up. She moved to it faster than she needed to, read whatever it said, and set it face down before turning around. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. Smooth. Practiced. "Big class today?" he asked. "I think so." She smiled at him. "Warm enough. Comfortable enough. Ivan usually gets a good group on Saturdays." She said the name the way you say a word you've said 1,000 times. Easy. Automatic. Devonte looked back at his report. She kissed him on the cheek before she left. Light. Brief. The kind of kiss that exists to be performed rather than felt. He heard the garage door go up and then down. He heard her car back out of the driveway. He sat at the table for a few minutes longer. He finished reading the page he was on. He closed the report and set it to the left of his coffee mug, squared with the table's edge. Then he got up, put on his jacket, and got in his truck. Okafor Elite Martial Arts sat on Delmar Avenue in a converted retail strip, a wide glass front with the name stenciled in bold gold letters, a wall of trophies visible even from across the street. The parking lot was half full for a Saturday morning. A handful of people moved in and out, gym bags over shoulders, kids in tiny uniforms trailing parents toward the door. Devante parked across the street and left the engine running. Trisha's silver Accord was already there, pulled into a spot near the entrance. She was still in the car. He watched. Ivan Okafor came out of the front entrance at 8:14 a.m. Devante had seen the name on the dojo's website. He had not seen the man. He took stock of him now in the automatic, unhurried way of someone trained to assess without staring. Tall, wide through the shoulders. The kind of physical confidence that didn't need to be announced because it was just the way the man occupied space. Like he'd done the math and confirmed he was the largest variable in the equation. He was wearing a dark track jacket over his GI pants, a silver watch catching the morning light. He drove a black Audi parked in the reserved spot nearest the door. He walked straight to Trisha's car before she got out, like he knew exactly where she'd park. She stepped out, smiling, and something in Devante went very, very still. It wasn't the smile. It was what the smile meant. It was loose in a way that smiles aren't when you're performing them. Easy, unguarded, real. Ivan put his hand on the small of her back as they turned toward the entrance, and Trisha leaned into it. Not a flinch, not an adjustment, just into it, like a habit, like a thing her body already knew to do. Devante watched them walk through the front door and disappear into the gold-lettered building. He looked at the clock on the dashboard. He looked back at the door. He sat there for 4 minutes. He did not reach for his phone. He did not grip the steering wheel. He breathed at the same rate he had breathed all morning, sitting at the table with his report and his coffee and the low sound of the television. Then he put the truck in drive and went home. He made eggs, scrambled, with a little hot sauce, the way he'd always made them on Saturday mornings. He washed the pan, dried it, put it back. He refilled his coffee. He sat back down at the table and finished the logistics report. Trisha came home at 11:20 a.m., flushed and bright-eyed, gym bag over her shoulder. "How was class?" he asked. She set her bag by the stairs and stretched her arms over her head with the easy theatrics of a woman coming off a good workout. "Really good, actually. We worked submissions today. My hip flexors are going to hate me tomorrow." She laughed a little at her own joke. Devante nodded. "Sounds like a solid session." It was. She moved toward the stairs. "I'm going to shower." He watched her go. He noted the way the lie had come out of her. Smooth and warm and full of the right small details, like something she'd had time to prepare on the drive home. He picked up his coffee cup. He took a slow sip. He said nothing. He was awake at 5:31 a.m. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet of the house, Trisha's breathing beside him, slow and even, the hum of the ceiling fan, the distant sound of a dog somewhere down the street. He got up without disturbing the mattress. He pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants and padded down to the kitchen in the dark. The coffee maker ran. He stood at the window and watched the backyard while it did. The oak tree they'd planted the first year in this house was bigger now. He hadn't really noticed that until this moment. 4 years of growth, quiet and steady, while everything else was apparently happening around him. He sat down at the table when the coffee was ready. He thought about what he'd seen yesterday. Not the way a wounded man thinks, cycling through the same image over and over, each pass getting more ragged. He thought about it the way he thought about threat assessments, clinically. What he knew. What he didn't know yet. What the gap between those two things was going to cost him if he moved before it was closed. He knew what he'd seen. A hand on a back. A lean. A smile with nothing held back. What he didn't know was the shape of it. How long? How deep? How far? He picked up his coffee cup, set it back down. He needed to know the full picture before he did anything. That was the rule. The one that had kept him and 8 other men alive in conditions where the wrong decision didn't get you a reprimand, it got you a body bag. Confirm before you move. Confirm everything. He had 5 days before his next work trip. That would be enough. The shared bank account was the first thing he looked at. He sat in the small office off the hallway that evening, door closed, the house quiet around him. He pulled up 18 months of statements on the laptop and started reading from the oldest entry forward. It took him 40 minutes to find the first one. A hotel charge, a Hampton Inn 2 towns over, on a Thursday night in April 14 months ago. $93. He wrote it down. Then he kept reading. There were more. Not every month, but regular enough to have a rhythm. Hotels, mostly. A few restaurants he recognized by name. The kind of places with dim lighting and no kids' menus. The kind you take someone when the meal is not really about the food. He cross-referenced dates against his own calendar, his travel schedule, his deployment records. Almost every charge landed on a night he was away. The ones that didn't landed on days Tricia had told him she was doing something else. He wrote them all down. 22 months of charges. The earliest one was dated 3 months after he came home from his second deployment. He stared at that date for a moment. Then he closed the browser and opened another one. The cloud backup was something he'd set up 4 years ago on their shared phone plan. It was a system he'd built more out of professional habit than suspicion. He backed everything up. Work files, personal files, photos, communications. He hadn't looked at it in 2 years, and he was reasonably certain Tricia didn't know it existed. He'd never mentioned it. There'd never been a reason. There was a reason now. The deleted texts loaded slowly, recovering in fragments the way old data does. He sat in the office chair and read through them in silence. They went back further than the financial records. He read them in order, following the thread from careful and somewhat guarded at the start to something much more open and much more intimate by the time the record caught up to the present. Ivan called her his, casually, repeatedly, like a word he'd decided on and used without thinking about it anymore. Tricia told Ivan she had never felt this seen. He read that one twice. He thought about the deployment, coming home quieter than he left, finding it hard to re-enter the rhythms of an ordinary life after 16 months in a place that was the opposite of ordinary in every possible way. He knew he'd been distant. He knew he hadn't always been easy to reach. He had been working on it, slowly, without making a production out of it, the way he worked on most things. Apparently, she hadn't waited. And then, reading further back, to the messages from that first year, he found the part that shifted something cold and specific into place beneath his ribs. Tricia, in a message to Ivan, writing about a conversation she'd had with their mutual friends, describing how she'd told them that Devante just wasn't emotionally available since he got back, describing how people understood, how they felt for her. He had been walking around in a community that had already heard his wife's version of events for nearly 2 years. He had been tried and convicted in rooms he'd never been invited into. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he closed the laptop. He backed everything up twice. The financial records, the statements, the printed copies of the texts he'd photographed from the screen, one copy on a USB drive he locked in the small fireproof box in the closet, one copy on a secure cloud account Tricia had no access to and no knowledge of. Then he went to the kitchen and started dinner. He made chicken, rice, and the roasted vegetables Tricia liked. He set the table properly, placemats, glasses, the whole thing. He had the news on low in the background when she came downstairs and saw the table. "Oh," she said. "You cooked." "Felt like it," he said. She sat down across from him and he filled her glass with water. "How was your day?" he asked. She told him. Some billing issue at work. A coworker who talked too much. a lunch she'd had at the place near her office. She told it all with the ease and texture of someone who had been telling the truth their whole life. He nodded in the right places. He refilled her glass when it was low. He had everything he needed. He drove over on a Tuesday. He'd spent the 2 days before it doing ordinary things: work, groceries, a load of laundry. He let the plan sit in the back of his mind the way he used to let mission prep sit. Present, but not rattling around, not demanding attention before it was time. When Tuesday evening came, he changed out of his work clothes and put on dark jeans, a gray Henley, and his work boots. He checked himself in the mirror once. He looked like a man who installed cable or drove a delivery truck. Good. Okafor Elite Martial Arts sat on the corner of a strip between a tax office and a cell phone repair shop. The sign above the door was clean and professional, black and gold, the dojo name in bold block letters with a small silhouette of a fighter mid-kick beneath it. Through the front window, Devante could see the warm glow of interior lights and the movement of bodies on the mat. He pushed through the door. The smell hit him first. Rubber mat and effort and something faintly chemical from the cleaning spray they used on the floors. It was a familiar smell, not from his own training specifically, but from the kind of utilitarian spaces where men came to test themselves. A teenager near the back was gathering water bottles off the floor. 2 students in the waiting area were pulling on shoes. Devante took in the room in under 4 seconds. 2 exits. 12 students cooling down from what looked like the end of a session. A small office to the right, with the door half open. Rows of trophies along the left wall. Regional, state, national, a whole architecture of dominance arranged for maximum visibility. The mats were blue and firm and covered most of the main floor. Old habit. He wasn't even aware he'd done it. A door opened at the back. Even Okafor came out in full uniform. The GI was white and pressed and clean. The kind of clean that takes effort, deliberate effort. The kind a man maintains because appearance is part of the performance. The black belt around his waist was thick and worn at the edges in the specific way of something earned and maintained and displayed in equal measure. 3 gold stripes near the tip. He moved through the room the way men like him always moved. Like the floor expected his footsteps. Like every other person in the space was simply part of the scenery he passed through. He saw Devante. Something crossed his face. A flicker, half a second, recognition, and then recalibration. And then the slow, easy arrival of amusement. He knew the name. Of course he did. "Help you with something?" Ivan said. "Just looking around," Devante said. Ivan smiled. He moved closer. He let his eyes travel over Devante once. The work boots, the plain shirt, the way Devante carried himself without any particular posture. And he made a decision about what he was dealing with. Devante watched him make it. "You thinking about signing up?" Ivan said. He gestured loosely at the space. "We run beginner classes on Thursdays. Real beginner. No pressure." He let the pause sit for exactly the right amount of time. "Might also want to look into yoga first. Get some flexibility in before you step on a real mat. No shame in that." A couple of students nearby didn't quite laugh, but they came close. Ivan kept going. He described the open mat format with the tone of a man explaining traffic rules to someone who'd never driven a car. He said Devante was welcome to get on the mat right now. Learn what he was made of. Find out where his real level was. He said it like a gift. It wasn't a gift. "I appreciate the offer," Devante said. "I'll think about it." He turned toward the door. Ivan grabbed him by the shirt. The fingers closed around the back collar of the Henley, pulling, the move of a man accustomed to that grip, meaning the end of a conversation. In his dojo, in front of his students, that grip had always meant he was the last word on anything. What happened next was not a decision. It was older than decisions. It was installed. Devante pivoted inside the grab in one motion, stripped the hand at the wrist with a leverage that bent Ivan's elbow the wrong way just enough to break the grip, and used Ivan's own forward pull to redirect him, a controlled takedown that put 210 pounds of black belt down on that blue mat with a force that shook the trophies on the wall. Ivan recovered fast. The black belt was not decorative. He scrambled, got back to his feet with real speed, and the next 30 seconds were genuine. Even through combinations that had technique behind them, he secured a ground scramble. For one moment he achieved a dominant position and pressed it hard. And then Devante shifted. The stillness dropped away. Something moved behind his eyes that had no name in sport and no parallel in a dojo. He slipped Ivan's control the way water finds the space between stones, not against the technique, just through it, past it. And he applied the submission with the cold, architectural precision of a man who had learned this not in competition, but in the dark, in bad places, for real reasons. 8 seconds. Ivan was face down, arm locked, completely controlled. The room was silent. Devante released him and stood. He was not breathing hard. In the stillness after, something skidded across the mat from Devante's pocket, lost in the scramble. It came to rest near Ivan's hand. Ivan picked it up automatically, still dazed, still processing the fact of the mat against his face. He looked at it. A military ID card. Government issue. The photo matched the man standing above him without expression. The text read, U.S. Navy, Special Warfare Operator. Ivan stared at it. His face moved through several things in a row, none of them good. Devante crouched down, took the card back, and slid it into his pocket. He straightened and smoothed the front of his Henley with one hand. You should call your wife tonight, he said quietly. Just to check in. He walked out through the front door. The room stayed silent behind him. He sat in his truck in the parking lot and gave it 2 minutes. Let his breathing settle the rest of the way. Let the adrenaline finish its run through his system like he'd been taught, moving with it instead of against it until it passed. Then he took out his phone and opened the voice memo app. He spoke clearly and without pause. He recorded the time, the date, the location. He described the interaction in sequence, what Ivan had said, the exact words, the offer, the grab. He was precise. He left nothing out. He noted the names of the students who had been close enough to hear. He time-stamped the file and saved it. Then he scrolled to Uncle Ray's number and called. It rang twice. Hey, Unc, he said. You still know that attorney? The one who does divorce? Uncle Ray's house was a 10-minute drive from the dojo. Devante knew every turn without thinking about it. He had been making this drive since he was a teenager, after practice, after school, after the 2 deployments that brought him home quieter than he left. Ray's porch light was always on. That had never changed. He knocked once. Ray opened the door in a cardigan and reading glasses, a paperback still in his hand. He took one look at Devante's face, the stillness of it, the particular kind of calm that meant something significant had happened, and stepped back, without a word. He went directly to the kitchen and put on coffee. Devante sat down at the kitchen table. The same chairs with the same slight wobble on the left rear leg that Ray had been meaning to fix for 6 years. A police scanner murmured low on the counter. A stack of mail sat unopened near the fruit bowl. Ray set 2 mugs down and sat across from him. Talk, he said. Devante talked. He went through it in order. The parking lot on Saturday morning, the hand on Trisha's back, the 5 days of reconnaissance, the hotel charges, 22 months of them, the texts he had pulled from the cloud backup. He described the texts without editorializing. He said what Ivan called her. He said what she wrote back. He watched Ray's jaw tighten and kept going. He described the dojo, the GI, the trophies, the way Ivan had looked at him and made a decision about what he was dealing with, the open mat challenge, the grab. He described what happened after the grab. Ray sat forward. He put his hands on you. He did, in front of his own students. About 12 of them. Ray took his glasses off and set them on the table. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead and was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, he was not quiet. He wanted to drive back to that dojo right now. He wanted to make phone calls. He knew people from church, people from the neighborhood, people who had sons and daughters enrolled at Okafor Elite who needed to know exactly what kind of man was running that place. He wanted to call Trisha's mother, who had always thought Ray hung the moon and who would not stay silent once she knew. He said all of this at volume, his hands moving, the coffee going untouched. Devante let him finish. He did not interrupt. He did not try to calm Ray down. Ray's anger was real, and it was right, and it deserved to exist in full before the plan entered the room. That was how it worked between them. Ray held the fire. Devante held the blueprint. When Ray finally sat back and exhaled, Devante leaned forward and put both forearms on the table. 3 tracks, he said, all moving at the same time. Ray picked up his mug. He was listening now. First, I call Diana Osei in the morning. Get in front of her this week, before Trisha knows a single thing is moving. He laid it out plainly. The house was primarily in his name. The retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, the equity they had built. He had been the financial engine of the marriage for 9 years. He had rights he hadn't used yet. Diana would know exactly how to protect them before anyone could respond. Trisha moves nothing, touches nothing, because she won't know there's anything to move yet. Ray nodded slowly. Second track. Ivan's reputation. Devante's voice stayed even. He built that dojo on community trust. Parents dropped their kids off there. He applied for a veterans grant last quarter. I found the announcement in a local business newsletter. I served with 2 men on that board. They don't know his name yet. He paused. They will. Ray set his mug down carefully. Third, I confront Trisha, but only after the first 2 tracks are already locked. Not before. If she finds out early, she calls a lawyer. She starts moving the money she thinks I don't know about. She gets her story circulating before mine. I don't give her that window. He looked at his uncle steadily. She goes last. The kitchen was quiet, except for the scanner. Then Devante said, I need you to do something when the time comes. Ray straightened. Brenda Okafor. He watched Ray's face. You know her. From the neighborhood association, Ray said. 3, 4 years now. She's good people. She handles all the dojo's books. She's a co-owner. Devante let that land. She doesn't know anything, and she deserves to. Not from me, from someone she already trusts. He held Ray's gaze, not to hurt her, just to make sure she has what she's owed before Ivan can get ahead of it. Ray was quiet for a long moment. A woman who handles the books, he said slowly, and finds out her husband's been running around for 2 years, becomes the most powerful person in his financial world, Devante said. Overnight. Ray sat back in his chair. He looked at his nephew the way he had looked at him the morning he drove him to the recruiter's office, like he was seeing something fully formed that had been growing for a long time. Your grandmother, he said, raised you right. Devante finished his coffee. He drove home through quiet streets, changed, and got into bed. He closed his eyes. He slept without difficulty. In the morning, he called Diana Osei's office to schedule a consultation. Diana Osei's office was on the 4th floor of a building 2 blocks from the courthouse. No art on the walls, no decorative anything, just clean lines, a wide desk, and shelves of organized binders that had the look of weapons stored properly. The window behind her let in flat morning light. She sat in it like she belonged to it. She was already at her desk when the assistant showed Devante in. She did not stand. She gestured to the chair across from her and picked up her pen. Start from the beginning, she said. Don't summarize. I'll tell you what's relevant. Devante started from the beginning. He did not summarize. He went through it the same way he had gone through it with Uncle Ray, in order, without editorializing: the parking lot, the cloud backup, the hotel charges, the texts. He placed a USB drive on her desk. He placed a printed folder beside it. Inside the folder, a timeline he had constructed himself, dated and sourced, with the relevant financial statements tabbed and flagged in blue. Diana did not reach for either item while he spoke. She wrote notes in a compact, economical hand and asked questions at precise moments, not to slow him down, but to pin specific facts into place. How long had he been the primary earner? Were any accounts held jointly? Was his name on the deed alone or both names? What was the current market value of the house? When he finished, she reached for the folder. She went through it the way a doctor reads a chart, quickly, thoroughly, without reacting. She opened the USB drive on her laptop. She reviewed 3 documents, cross-referenced 2 of them against each other, and made a single additional note. Then she closed the folder. "You've done my first 3 weeks of work for me," she said. She turned the legal pad to face him. On it, she had drawn a simple column structure: assets on the left, documentation status on the right. She walked him through it, without decoration. The house, in both names, but financed primarily through his income, would be treated as a marital asset. His documentation of financial contribution was strong. The retirement accounts, both his and hers, were subject to division, but the disparity in contribution was significant and well documented. The investment portfolio, which he had built incrementally over 6 years, was the most valuable single asset outside the house. The texts and hotel records did not automatically determine the financial outcome in this state, she explained, but they established a clear pattern that supported his characterization of the marriage's breakdown. They mattered. "What they mostly do," Diana said, "is establish that you are not the aggressor, and never were. That matters for how mediation goes. And it matters for how a judge reads this if it goes past mediation." She set her pen down. "Here is what you do not do. You do not move money. You do not change account passwords. You do not make any financial shift that she could point to as reactive or retaliatory. You do not confront her. Not yet." She said it plainly, without softening it. "The moment you act before the paperwork is in position, you hand her a story. Right now, she doesn't have one. Keep it that way." Devante nodded. "Understood." Diana pulled up the financial statements on her laptop and began the full audit. Devante sat across from her and answered her questions when she had them. Mostly, she worked in silence. The building's ventilation system ran low overhead. Outside, traffic moved 4 floors below. She was 20 minutes into the audit when she stopped. She did not say anything immediately. She pulled up a second screen, checked something, pulled up a third. She made 2 notes. Then she looked up. "Did you know your wife opened a savings account 14 months ago, under her name, attached to a registered LLC?" Devante's expression did not move. "No." Diana turned the laptop to face him. On the screen was a financial record. Account statements, small and consistent withdrawals from the joint account, deposits into a separate line. The amounts were modest individually. 50 here, 120 there. Occasional larger ones, 300, 250, spread far enough apart to disappear in the ordinary noise of shared finances. But she had been doing it every month. 14 months of it. Never missing. "The transfers are sized deliberately," Diana said. "Small enough that they don't flag. Consistent enough that over 14 months they accumulate to something worth having when she's ready to move." She let him look at the numbers. The LLC was registered the same month the transfers started. Devante looked at the screen for a moment. Then he looked back at Diana. "What does that do to the mediation?" he asked. "It changes the entire picture," she said. "Fraudulent transfer of marital assets. That's not an emotional argument. That's a legal one, and it's documented." She closed the laptop. "She was planning to leave, and she was funding the exit without your knowledge. That is not a woman who was unhappy. That is a woman who was preparing. She said it without drama. Just the fact of it, placed on the desk between them. Devante thanked her. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and shook her hand. He took the elevator down to the parking garage. He found his truck on the second level and got in. He sat with his hands resting on the steering wheel and looked at the concrete wall in front of him. 14 months. Every dinner. Every ordinary evening on the couch. Every time she asked about his day, or complained about traffic, or said she was tired and went to bed early. Every morning she left for the dojo in her workout clothes, with her phone face down in her bag. Every single one of those moments, she had already been building the door she planned to walk out of. He sat with that for a few minutes. Not long, just long enough to let it be true. Then he started the engine. He drove home. He defrosted chicken, cooked rice, set the table. When Tricia came in from work, she dropped her bag by the door and said the traffic on 5th had been impossible. "Rough day," he said from the stove. "The usual," she said. He nodded and told her dinner would be ready in 10 minutes. She went upstairs to change. He stirred the rice and said nothing else. The mixer was held in a rented events space above a hardware store on Clement Street. String lights, high-top tables with white cloth, a cash bar in the corner doing steady business by 7 o'clock. The kind of room where small business owners came to feel connected to something larger than their own four walls. Devante wore a light blue button-down and dark slacks. He looked like a man who managed inventory or reviewed shipping contracts, which was exactly the point. He collected a name tag from the table at the door, wrote Devante, Logistics, and moved into the room. He had been to 100 rooms like this one. Different cities, different occasions, same geometry. People standing in clusters of 2 or 3, drinks held at chest level, voices calibrated to carry just far enough. He knew how to move through a space like this without drawing attention or leaving gaps. You smiled when someone caught your eye. You asked about the business, not the person. You listened more than you talked. You became part of the wallpaper, and the wallpaper heard everything. He recognized Brenda Okafor from the photo Uncle Ray had described to him. She was standing near the far end of the room beside a display table. Brochures for Okafor Elite fanned out neatly. A framed photo of the dojo's competition team. A sign-up sheet for a free introductory class. She was talking to a woman in a yellow blazer, nodding with the focused attention of someone who genuinely cared whether the conversation was useful. Devante drifted toward the table. He picked up a brochure. He read it with the mild interest of a man who had no particular stake in it. Brenda finished her conversation, turned, and noticed him looking at the competition photo. "You thinking about signing up?" she asked. Easy smile. Practiced, but not fake. "Maybe," Devante said. "I've been looking for something to get back into. Used to train a little years ago." "What kind?" "Mixed. Here and there. Nothing serious." She nodded. "We've got a good adult fundamentals class. Tuesday and Thursday evenings." She tapped the sign-up sheet. "No pressure. First class is always free." "I'll think about it," he said. They talked for 4 minutes. He asked about the dojo's programs, and she answered with the fluency of someone who had built the thing from the ground up and knew every corner of it. Enrollment numbers, the kids' program she was most proud of, the renovation they'd finished on the back training room last spring. She mentioned the grant application they had submitted for the Veterans Outreach Program, something she had researched and written herself over the course of 3 months. Her voice carried the particular pride of a person who had done more than half the work on something without needing to announce it. She did not mention her husband by name once. Devante shook her hand at the end of it and moved on. He knew what he needed to know. He spent the next 20 minutes working the rest of the room. He talked to a woman who ran a printing company. He talked to a man who owned 2 dry cleaning locations and wanted to expand to a 3rd. He drank tonic water with lime and laughed at the right moments, and was completely, pleasantly unmemorable. Then he heard Ivan's voice from across the room. He did not turn immediately. He let the sound locate him first. Ivan was standing near the bar with another man, shorter, wearing a polo shirt with a small embroidered logo Devante didn't recognize. He drifted toward the near end of the bar and ordered another tonic water. He positioned himself at the corner of the counter, facing slightly away. Ivan was comfortable. That was the word for it. He had his drink in hand, his posture open, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man who believed every room was his room. "Been talking to a guy in Buckhead about the space," Ivan was saying. "Probably 12 months out. 14 at the most. Atlanta market is completely different. Real money there. You taking the whole operation?" The man, Curtis, Devante gathered, asked. "Restructuring. Keep the current location running, probably bring in a manager. But the real play is Atlanta." Ivan took a drink. "Trisha's already got contacts down there from her billing network. Makes the transition a lot cleaner." Curtis raised an eyebrow. "Trisha?" "Yeah." Ivan said it casually. The name of a woman whose husband was 3 feet away and invisible to him. "She's been part of the plan for a while now. Smart woman. Knows how to move." Curtis nodded slowly. "My wife doesn't know yet," Ivan said, quieter, but not nearly quiet enough. "That's the part I'm managing. But it's close." He said it the way a man talks about a business complication, not a person, a variable. Devante stood at the bar. He took a slow sip of his tonic water and looked at the bottles lined up along the wall behind the counter, amber and clear and dark green, neatly arranged, everything in its place. He set his glass down, thanked the bartender, and walked out. He sat in his truck and let the quiet settle. After a few minutes, he called Uncle Ray. "How was it?" Ray asked. "Educational." Devante leaned back in the seat. "She built that grant application herself. Spent 3 months on it. She has no idea about any of it." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Lord, he's also telling his business associates about Atlanta. By name." Devante watched a couple leave the building entrance, laughing at something. "Trisha's a logistics problem he's solving. That's all she ever was." "She doesn't know that either," Ray said. "No," Devante said. "She doesn't." Ray exhaled through his nose, the sound of a man holding his temper with both hands. "So, is it time?" "Almost," Devante said. "1 more week." Ray said, "I'm ready when you are." "I know you are," Devante said. "1 more week." He ended the call. He started the engine and pulled out of the lot. The house was quiet by 10. Trisha had gone to bed at 9:30, the way she always did on weeknights. A glass of water on the nightstand, a podcast playing low, the light out by the time the first segment ended. He had listened to her footsteps cross the ceiling above him, the creak of the bed. Then, nothing. Devante sat at the kitchen table and looked at what 6 weeks of work looked like when it was finished. The documents were organized into 3 identical sets, each in its own manila folder. Hotel receipts sorted by date, printed texts with the relevant passages marked in the margin, bank statements with the LLC transfers highlighted in yellow, Diana's preliminary filings, the voice memo transcripts, everything labeled, everything numbered. He had done this kind of work before, in other contexts, for other purposes. The discipline was the same. You gathered, you verified, you organized, you prepared, and then you waited for the moment the preparation became action. He was done waiting. He took out his phone and called Uncle Ray. It was late, but Ray picked up on the second ring. He always did. "It's time," Devante said. "Contact Brenda." A short silence. Then Ray said, "I'll reach out to her tomorrow morning." "Through Denise," Devante said. "Keep it quiet." "I know how to do this," Ray said, and there was no irritation in it, just the calm of a man who had been waiting 6 days for this exact instruction and was ready. "I'll be careful with her. I know you will. Get some sleep." Ray said. Devante said goodnight and ended the call. Ray called back the following evening, just after 6. Devante was in the garage, reorganizing a shelf he didn't need to reorganize. His hands needed something to do. I met her for coffee, Ray said. Little place on Marbury Street. Denise made the introduction. Brenda thought it was a general community thing. I waited until Denise stepped away. He paused. I gave her the dates. The hotel near the airport. The LLC name. Told her to pull the transaction records herself before she did anything else. How did she take it? Ray was quiet for a moment. She didn't say much. Just sat very still and asked me if I was sure. I told her I was. She asked if I had anything in writing. I gave her the 2 pages Diana cleared for disclosure. And then? She folded them and put them in her bag, Ray said. Stood up, shook my hand, thanked me, walked out. Devante waited. She wasn't crying, Ray said. She was pulling records. I know because Denise texted me an hour later. Brenda had already called the bank. Devante set down the box he was holding. Brenda Okafor had her name on every account that kept Okafor Elite running. Had from the beginning. She had built those accounts alongside everything else. And what she built, she could also close. Okay, Devante said. Yeah, Ray said quietly. Okay. The next evening, Tricia made pasta. She set the table without being asked, which she rarely did anymore, and they ate with the television off and the kitchen light warm above them. She was in a good mood. Devante noted it without comment. We should plan a trip, she said, twirling her fork. We haven't gone anywhere in almost 2 years. It'd be good for us. Yeah, Devante said. He took a sip of water. Pick somewhere you've always wanted to go. Don't worry about cost. She looked up from her plate. Something crossed her face. Surprise, maybe, or something trying to look like it. Seriously? Why not? He said. You only live once. She smiled. It was a real smile, or close enough to real that the difference didn't matter anymore. Okay, she said. Let me think about it. Take your time, he said. She did the dishes afterward. He dried them and put them away, and they moved around each other in the kitchen with the practiced efficiency of 2 people who had shared a small space for a long time. She kissed him on the cheek before she went upstairs. He stood at the counter and listened to her go. He was still at the table at 11:30 when the house had been silent for over an hour. He got up. He walked to the hallway. He lifted the SEAL team photo off the wall. The nail left a small, pale circle in the paint, and carried it back to the kitchen table. He set it down and looked at it. 14 faces, desert light behind them, some of them squinting, none of them smiling exactly, but something close to it. Men who had known precisely what he was capable of, and who never once asked him to be less than that. He had not looked at this photo, really looked at it, in a long time. He sat with it for a while. The grief came the way it sometimes did, clean and private, and without theater. He let it. Then he turned the photo face down on the table. He turned off the kitchen light. He walked upstairs, got into bed, and closed his eyes. He slept. Tomorrow was the day. She came downstairs at 7:45. Devante heard her before he saw her. The particular sound of her weekend routine, the deliberate footsteps, the bathroom door, the quiet that followed. He had been at the kitchen table for 40 minutes already. Coffee made, 2 cups poured, the manila folder centered in front of him like a place setting. He heard her on the stairs. She came around the corner into the kitchen, already dressed for the dojo. Fitted black leggings, a zip-up jacket. Her hair pulled back the way she wore it when she trained. She stopped when she saw him. "You're up early," she said. "Sit down, Tricia." Something in his voice made her still. Not the words, the flatness behind them, the complete and total absence of anything to read. She sat. She looked at the folder. She looked at the 2 cups of coffee. She looked at him. "What is this?" He opened the folder and placed the first item on the table between them. A hotel receipt. The Hampton near the airport. Printed clean, the date visible in the top right corner, the room charge itemized below. October 14th, he said. 18 months ago. She looked at it. Her jaw tightened. He placed the second item beside it. Another receipt. Different hotel. Different date. November 2nd, he said. He placed a third item on the table. A printed text message. Ivan's name at the top. You're mine. And Trisha's response below it. I know. I know I am. Her composure cracked. It happened fast. A sudden shift in her breathing, her eyes moving away from the paper and then back, her fingers pressing flat against the table's edge. Devante, there are 22 months of records here, he said. He was not loud. He was not cold. He was simply precise. Hotel charges, restaurant charges, texts. Some of them you deleted. The cloud backup you didn't know I had set up caught them. She said, I can explain. He placed the fourth item on the table. The LLC transfer records. Diana's summary sheet on top. 3 months of statements beneath it. Tricia looked at the papers. The color shifted in her face. This is the account you opened 14 months ago, he said. Here are the transfers. Small enough to miss if no one was looking. Consistent enough to tell a clear story once someone was. She sat back. She crossed her arms. When she looked up at him, something had reorganized behind her eyes. The same pivot he had watched her practice, probably without knowing she was practicing it. The move from caught to injured. You were never here, she said. Her voice shook, but the words themselves were smooth, like something said before. You came back from that deployment and you just disappeared. You were in this house, and you were gone. I was lonely, Devante. I was lonely for 2 years while you were right here. He set the next document on the table. She looked down at it involuntarily. What is? That's the timestamp on your first text to Ivan, he said. 11 weeks after I got home. She went quiet. You were telling people I was emotionally unavailable before the sheets were cold, he said. Still flat. Still even. You built that story while you were building everything else. It wasn't... She stopped. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He placed the last document on the table. She didn't look at it. Devante. Her voice had changed again, softer now. Something that wanted to sound like remorse. Is there any way? Can we talk about this? Can we... She reached for her phone. Diana Osi is my attorney, he said. You'll want to retain your own before you make any calls. Her hand stopped on the phone. She stared at him. He stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and put it on. One sleeve and then the other. Unhurried. He picked up his keys from the table. The folder he left where it was. Organized, complete, every item in its place. He walked to the door. Devante. Her voice followed him across the kitchen. Where are you going? He paused at the door. He did not turn around. To finish a conversation I started a few weeks ago. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft, definitive click. The sound of a well-fitted door in a well-kept house. Nothing more and nothing less. Inside, Tricia sat alone at the kitchen table. The documents were spread in front of her. Both cups of coffee had gone cold. The morning light came through the window above the sink the way it always did, warming the same pale countertop it had warmed for 4 years, falling across the same floor, filling the same quiet. Everything looked exactly the same. None of it was. The parking lot of Okafor Elite was half full. Saturday morning. Families. A minivan with a youth soccer sticker on the back. A row of bikes locked to the rack near the entrance. Through the front windows, Devante could see movement. The small, quick shapes of kids on the mat. A class already running. He parked. He sat for a moment. Then he got out. The smell hit him when he pushed through the front door. Rubber mat and chalk dust, and the particular warmth of a building full of working bodies. A teenage girl at the front desk looked up from her phone. "Can I help you?" "Tell Ivan he has a visitor," Devante said. "Tell him it's Devante Cross." She picked up the desk phone and relayed the message, watching him the way young people watch adults who make them uncertain. Devante stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the trophy wall. The same trophies he had clocked the first time he walked through that door. Regional, state, national. A framed magazine profile near the top. Ivan's face grinning out from under a headline about local entrepreneurship. He heard Ivan before he saw him. The footsteps from the back hallway had a particular quality, deliberate, weighted, the walk of a man reminding himself how to enter a room. Ivan came through the doorway in his GI, the black belt in place, the 3 gold stripes pointing toward the floor. He had the look of someone who had been rehearsing an expression and wasn't quite satisfied with it. He stopped a few feet away. "Cross," he said. "Ivan." Devante tilted his head toward the far end of the waiting area, away from the front desk. "Over here." Ivan followed, which was the first tell, because a man entirely in control of his situation does not follow. He leads. They stood near the water fountain at the end of the hallway, angled so the front desk couldn't hear clearly. Through the window in the studio door, Devante could see a parent seated in the waiting area on the other side, scrolling a phone, half present. Devante kept his voice low and steady. "I know about the hotels," he said. 22 months of them. I know about the texts. I have them printed and documented and sitting in my attorney's office right now." He paused. "I know about Atlanta. The expansion plan. The timeline. I was standing 8 feet from you when you told Curtis about it at the mixer." Ivan's jaw shifted. His chin came up. The reflex of a man recalibrating toward aggression. Devante continued, unhurried. "I know about the LLC account Tricia opened to fund her exit. My attorney found it during the financial review. That's in the filing, too." He looked at Ivan evenly. "I came here because you needed to hear it from me, face to face, as a courtesy. It's done, Ivan. All of it." Ivan was quiet for one long second. Then he stepped forward, closed the distance by half, dropping his chin, letting his size occupy the space between them the way he had done 1,000 times in 1,000 rooms where it had always worked. "And what exactly," he said, low and deliberate, "are you going to do about it?" The same question as before, same weight behind it, same fundamental misreading of the man in front of him. Devante did not step back. He looked up at Ivan without any change in his expression. No heat, no fear, not even the particular stillness that comes from suppressing fear. Just a man who had already finished his calculations and was waiting for the other person to catch up. "Nothing," Devante said. "You're already done." He let that sit for a moment. "Brenda has been in the dojo's accounts since Wednesday," he said. "Full access. She's had it from the beginning. So I imagine you know what that means better than I do." He watched Ivan's face. The calculation happening there was almost visible, like cards being turned over fast. "The Veterans Community Grant Board. They're reviewing your application next month. I served with 2 of those men. They know your name now." Ivan's expression moved through several things in rapid order. None of them were confidence. "We're finished here," Devante said. He turned and walked back through the waiting area toward the front door. He passed the front desk. He passed the trophy wall. He did not look back. Behind him, Ivan stood on the floor of his own dojo, in his uniform, his black belt. In front of the window where his students were visible on the mat, in front of the waiting area parent who had lowered their phone at some point during the exchange and had not raised it again. By the time Devante reached his truck, he heard nothing from inside. He sat in the driver's seat. He pulled out his phone and opened his messages with Diana Osi. He typed one word, "Go." He set the phone on the seat beside him. Through the windshield, the parking lot was ordinary. Families arriving, a dad holding a small gym bag, a kid running ahead toward the entrance. Devante started the truck. He drove to Uncle Ray's house. Ray was already on the porch when he pulled up, 2 cups of coffee on the railing, like he had known the approximate time without being told. Devante parked and climbed the porch steps and sat in the other chair. They didn't say much. The morning was cool and clear, the street quiet, a dog barking 1 yard over and then going still. They sat together and drank their coffee. The first domino fell on a Wednesday. Brenda Okafor filed for divorce and froze every joint account tied to Okafor Elite Martial Arts before Ivan finished his morning classes. She had access to all of it. She always had. And she used that access the way a woman uses something she has been quietly holding for years, without knowing she would one day need it. The dojo's operating accounts locked up tight. Payroll, equipment leases, the supply orders Ivan had placed for the Atlanta build-out, all of it stopped. Ivan couldn't touch $1 without her signature. Word moved the way it always moves in a community built on reputation and proximity, fast and selectively. Within a week, 2 of Yvonne's senior instructors had heard enough. Marcus Webb, who had been with the dojo for 6 years, and a woman named Carla Torres, who ran the youth program on weekday afternoons, both handed in their notice within 2 days of each other. They were polite about it, professional. They didn't make speeches. They opened their own studio across town. They sent emails to their regular students. Approximately 40% of Okafor Elite's enrolled membership followed them out the door. The Veterans Community Grant Board met the following Thursday. The vote was unanimous. Ivan's application was denied without extended deliberation. The board cited concerns about organizational stability. 2 of the 5 voting members had deployed with a man named Devante Cross, and they had made a few calls the week prior. They knew what they were looking at. The Atlanta expansion dissolved inside of 10 days after that. Ivan's business partner, a gym chain owner out of Buckhead who had liked the numbers and the reputation, pulled out of the arrangement entirely once the freeze and the denial became known. He sent a single email. He did not follow up. There was no Atlanta. There was never going to be one now. Trisha's story fell apart differently, slower, and in some ways worse. She had spent 2 years building it carefully. The portrait of a woman enduring a distant husband, a man who came home from deployment and left her emotionally behind, a marriage that had quietly died long before she walked away from it. She had told that story to friends, to family, to anyone who sat with her long enough over coffee or a phone call. She had shaped the sympathy before she ever needed to collect it. When the actual timeline surfaced, 22 months, not a spontaneous thing but a sustained and deliberate one, the LLC account she had opened and fed quietly for over a year, the Atlanta plan she had never once mentioned to anyone in her personal life. The sympathy didn't waver. It inverted, completely and permanently. The friends who had nodded along went quiet, then distant. Her cousin stopped returning texts. A woman from her church, who had called Devante, emotionally checked out to 3 different people, sent him a private message that said simply, "I'm sorry. I didn't know the whole picture." Devante read it, replied with 2 words, "Thank you," and moved on. Diana Osei handled the mediation with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had prepared so thoroughly that the outcome was never seriously in doubt. She placed the LLC transfer documentation on the table at the first session and let it speak. 14 months of transfers, carefully sized, consistent. A paper trail that told a very clear story about intent. Trisha's attorney, a decent enough lawyer who had walked into the room expecting a contested proceeding, took one look at the documentation and quietly advised his client to consider her options. Trisha signed. She received considerably less than she had planned for. The house stayed with Devante. The majority of the investment accounts stayed with Devante. The exit she had engineered over 14 careful months. The funded escape. The new life waiting in Atlanta. yielded a fraction of what she had built it to produce. She and Ivan lasted 4 months after that. Ivan, facing a collapsed business and his own divorce proceedings, ended it without drama or explanation. No long conversation, no real goodbye. He had never been building toward her. She had been a plan, and the plan was gone, and so he moved on to whatever came next. Devante heard about it through Uncle Ray, who relayed the information with a particular kind of quiet satisfaction, and then did not mention it again. 14 months after Diana filed the final paperwork, Uncle Ray hosted a gathering on a friend's rooftop in the middle of the city. Nothing formal. Good food, low music, people who had known each other long enough that nobody needed to explain anything to anyone. Devante had sold the house 3 months after the divorce finalized. He bought a smaller place, a 2-bedroom not far from where he grew up. Clean lines, good light, no compromises built into any of it. It was entirely his. The silence in it belonged to him. He had been promoted at the firm in the spring. Senior logistics consultant, a title that meant more responsibility and more latitude, both of which suited him. He had started running in the mornings again, something he had let go of without noticing during the marriage years. His body remembered it quickly. He was faster than he expected. He was sleeping well. On the rooftop, the evening was warm. The city spread out below them, glowing and indifferent and alive. Lights coming on as the sky deepened from orange to dark blue. Devante stood at the railing with a cold bottle in his hand and felt, without naming it, the specific ease of a man who has nothing unresolved. Uncle Ray appeared at his elbow. He looked at his nephew the way he sometimes did, taking a full account, checking something only he could measure. And then he said, "You know what your grandmother would say right now." Devante smiled. It was easy, natural, the kind that doesn't require any effort. "Hold your tongue," he said. "Hold your cards." Ray clinked his bottle against Devante's. "And you played every one of them right." They stood at the railing together for a moment, easy in the quiet, the city going about its life below. Later, after Ray stepped away to refill something, and the rooftop filled with low laughter and the smell of good food, Devante stood alone at the railing. He looked out at the lights. The SEAL team photo hung in the hallway of his new place now, right where he passed it every morning. Nobody told him it was intimidating anymore. Nobody told him anything about it at all. It was just there, the way the truth is just there. Present, unambiguous, requiring no explanation. He took a long breath. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.